Hey LARPerinos, it's Avi from Of Science and Swords here. You might be wondering why I'm in the workshop today rather than out with all the cool stuff. Great swords are pretty great, but what do you do when the great sword that you've purchased happens to be 5 centimeters too short to be a great sword in your rule set? Today, we have a solution. Add a skull! So the basic theory of this add a skull idea is pretty simple. We just want to get an extra 5 centimeters onto the base of that sword to make it 140 centimeters overall to become compliant with being a great weapon under a very particular set of game rules here in Melbourne. How long's the skull? Certainly longer than the 5 centimeters that we need. Now, while the skull may be longer than the 5 centimeters we need, don't forget that we also need to adhere it securely to the end of the sword so that it will actually stay there, which is one of the reasons why having a 9.5 centimeter skull is of some benefit to this little project. You could, of course, use a larger skull. Quite frankly, you can use anything so long as it's still going to be a little bit soft and squishy in case you accidentally hit someone with the butt of your weapon. What you're going to want is a drill with some wood coring bits, such as I've installed in my drop drill here. You could use just regular drill bits with the regular round boring section, but it's going to take you a while because they're quite thin, and you are going to need something that is going to be as wide as this head in the hole that it creates. Otherwise, you're going to end up creating numerous little holes, which you then need to core out manually, and that's going to create issues down the road. You don't need a drop drill for this project. I just find that it is much easier to use the actual purpose-built tools that allow you to hold the object directly in place. You can, of course, just use a regular drill and clamp the skull into place, or clamp the drill and bring the skull into place. But that is a terrible idea because you're going to have moving parts near your fingers. Don't do that. Because we are coring out a piece of foam, it's going to kick up a lot of fine dust, so do make sure that you've got a respirator mask on and you are doing this in a well-ventilated area. Let's get underway.
We now have our 2 primary holes. As you can see, they are almost a wide enough fit for that. So what we need to do now is make sure that it drills out fully, and we can actually slip it over the top there. We want to go down about that much. As you can see, our hole is starting to get nice and deep. Ah, that's coming along nicely. Just need to get scooch deeper, and then we're good to go.
So now that we've cored out the back of the skull and we've got our sword, it comes time to adhere them together. I'm going to be using a polyurethane-based adhesive. For those of you here in Australia, my recommendation is Sikaflex 11FC. Now, the stuff does get absolutely everywhere. It is quite adhesive, so do make sure that you are wearing disposable gloves to do this job. Alrighty, so you've got your adhesive, you've got your skull, blah 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 blah. First step, we're gonna grab our skull and just fill our skull hole with Sika. Now, seeing as the stuff is quite viscous, you're going to want to give it a bit of a prod around so that it fills up the gaps nicely. So, prod, prod, prod. You can see what I mean by viscous. Once you've got a sufficient amount in there, just going to cram that in. Now, you are going to get a little bit of overflow, and that's okay, because you actually want to make sure that it's bonded nice and securely. In the end, you're going to end up with it looking somewhat like that, and then you're going to want to fill in that bit over the top and also around at the edges. So, we've got all the extra spooge coming out the sides. What do we do with that? Very simple. We grab our paddle pop stick. I'm just going to snap this one in half so that I've got 2 paddle pop sticks to work with here. and we start cleaning off the excess. All right, so we're just gonna try and clean off as much of the excess as possible, and where we can, we actually want to try to smooth it out as well. Now, at the moment, this is not the cleanest job. I actually have some tools that I intend to use to clean this up a little bit more. I know there's a whole bunch of stuff here that is not quite as smooth as it could be, like, you know, there and there. We're actually going to remove that with acetone, because the Sikaflex just sort of melts away underneath that.
One eternity later.
Alrighty, LARPerinos, I apologize about not filming the process, so we had to go with the hand sculpting method. The way that you do the hand sculpting method is by having several disposable gloves and a glass full of mineral turpentine, and that allows you to just drag your fingers along slowly, gently, until you've got nice, smooth sculpting. Now this Sikaflex, unfortunately, is now doped with terps, which means the drying time is going to be even longer. I'm going to leave this for about 48 hours, so that should all be nice and solid. It will still be wet on the inside, so it's not going to be suitable for play at that point, but it will be solid enough to allow me to actually repaint over, as the customer wants the skull to be brass, so we're going to have to do that entire section in the same brass. Alrighty guys, see you in a couple days. Et voila! After leaving this to dry overnight, you can see that I've painted up the skull and the hilt for the customer. I've also learned that this particular gold paint has some rather interesting light reflective properties where it will let light right through it at certain angles to see the original base color. It's pretty interesting stuff, actually. But the real test comes. Struggling so much. As you can see, the sword is now over 140 centimeters long, which puts it into the monster kill category for the game that this particular customer is using it for. So, mission accomplished. You need to add an extra 5 centimeters to the end of your blade, or your staff, or any weapon, just to increase its size for category reasons. Epic Armory Small Skull is the way to go. And if you need 10, try the medium. Well, LARPerinos, we will see you on the battlefield.